Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Sri Lanka's former wartime Defence Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa has claimed victory in the fiercely contested presidential election. Talking to media, Rajapaksa's spokesperson said he won with a clear majority. The spokesperson claimed Rajapaksa got between 53 to 54% of the total vote. Earlier, the Election Commission said with over 500,000 votes counted, Rajapaksa was leading with almost 53% of the vote. Sajith Premadasa has accepted defeat and stepped down from the ruling United National Party deputy leader position. He congratulated his rival Rajapaksa. Election Commission Chairman Mahinda Deshapriya said that voters' turnout was nearly 80%. Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has blamed foreign enemies for sabotage after violent protests over gasoline price hike flared. Backing a government's price hike in an interview, Khamenei said he understands some people are worried about this decision, but he accused Tehran's foreign enemies of intervention and arson to breach Iran's security and post-revolution unity. He urged people to trust their government to look out for their best interest in testing times. Earlier, Iran's Interior Ministry warned that its security forces will take action against any violence. One person was killed yesterday in clashes after protests erupted in more than a dozen cities in response to the measure. The UK government and armed forces have been accused of covering up the killings of civilians by British troops in Afghanistan and Iraq. New evidence from Iraq Historic Allegations Team, the IHAT, says there is credible evidence that British troops committed war crimes. IHAT, a UK government body, was shut down in February 2017 after it reported over 1,000 cases of alleged war crimes. In a fresh set of revelations, IHAT detectives said the soldiers should have been prosecuted for the killings. The British Defence Ministry says it rejects the unsubstantiated allegation of a pattern of cover-ups. Operation Northmoor was set up by the government in 2014 and looked into 52 alleged illegal killings. Afghanistan's Election Commission has said the vote recount and auditing process will resume across the country today. The recounting was halted after Chief Executive Abdullah and 10 other candidates protested about the process. Talking to media in Kabul, Election Commissioner Hawa Alam Nuristani said the concerns of candidates have been addressed. She said the commission held technical meetings with candidates' representatives and discussed controversial points. Accepting the demands of the candidates, Nuristani said only biometric votes will be considered valid. The candidates had earlier said 300,000 tallied votes were not biometrically approved and must not be included in the recount. In Hong Kong, clashes have resumed after protesters threw bricks at people trying to clean up the debris-strewn roadway. All schools in Hong Kong will still remain shut on Monday out of safety concerns. The Education Bureau made the announcement as protesters and police clashed outside Polytechnic University. Police fired tear gas at protesters, throwing gasoline bombs, stones, arrows and javelins. The face-off came hours after intense overnight clashes left fires blazing in the street. The latest confrontation in Hong Kong follows a week of traffic chaos caused by the protesters, which brought parts of the city to a standstill. The US and South Korea have postponed upcoming military drills in an effort to bolster a stalled peace push with North Korea. This report has the details.
The decision came just 2 days after US, Japanese and South Korean officials met in Seoul to discuss the alliance and inter-Korean peace. During the trilateral meeting with US and South Korea in Bangkok, Tokyo dismissed any positive outcome of negotiations with Pyongyang. Speaking in Bangkok, Pentagon Chief Mark Esper said the step is not a concession but an effort in good faith to enable peace.
It is important that we all work together, closely, to achieve our shared goals. This means looking beyond and overcoming bilateral issues that harm our efforts and play into the hands of Pyongyang and Beijing.
North Korea has responded by preconditioning denuclearization talks with the withdrawal of US hostile policy.
In the U.S., 5 members of a family, including 3 children, have been killed in a mass shooting in Southern California. Police say the shooter committed suicide after going on a killing spree in the neighborhood of San Diego City. They said the 4th child is in a critical condition and undergoing surgery. Police said they responded to the 911 call, but it was already too late.
Officers arrived on scene approximately a minute after that. They got no response at the door. They went around to the back of the house where they look in a window and they could see a child down covered in blood. They broke out a front window and forced entry into the residence. Once inside, they found several people down, suffering from apparent gunshots.
Investigators say they believe the father shot his family before turning the gun on himself. Now moving on, the U.S. has imposed new sanctions on Cuba's Interior Minister Julio Cesar Bermejo as part of its ongoing economic blockade against the country. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo accused Bermejo of human rights violations in Venezuela. Pompeo said Bermejo was responsible for arbitrarily arresting thousands of Cuban citizens and unlawfully incarcerating political prisoners. The U.S. Secretary of State called on other countries to join Washington by holding Cuba accountable. Earlier on Friday, the U.S. also expanded sanctions to 5 hotels owned by the Cuban military. Washington does not accept Havana's support for Nicolas Maduro's regime in Venezuela. In Bolivia, the death toll from the clashes between security officials and pro-Morales protesters has risen to 23. Inter-American Commission on Human Rights says 715 people were injured since the beginning of the political crisis this week. The commission said 9 protesters were killed yesterday. Bolivia's interim government has issued a decree granting impunity to the military for using force during protests. The commission said the decree violates international human rights standards and stimulates use of force to suppress mass protests. The United Nations has also warned that the violence can spin out of control after the death toll rose. Kiev says the process of returning Ukrainian ships detained by Russia is at its final stage. The vessels and their crew were seized last year in the Kerch Strait. Andriy Yermak, aide to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, said armored boats Bryansk and Nikopol will return to Kiev soon. Yermak said Russia aims to complete the process before the Normandy 4 talks. Yesterday, France confirmed the Normandy summit will take place on December the 9th in Paris. Russia freed all 24 Ukrainian sailors in a major prisoner swap between Kiev and Moscow on September the 7th. Moscow seized the Ukrainian vessels in November last year, accusing them of violating its territorial waters. In the Czech Republic, tens of thousands of people have taken to the streets of Prague in protest against Prime Minister Andrej Babiš. Protesters demanded Babiš step down over allegations of corruption, but Babiš has denied any wrongdoing. His minority coalition government is supported by the Communist Party in the parliament. The demonstration coincided with the 30th anniversary of the Velvet Revolution, when communist rule in Czechoslovakia crumbled weeks after the fall of the Berlin Wall. In Nigeria, 3 people have been killed in sporadic violence during state polls in Bayelsa and Kogi. The 2 states are voting to elect new governors and a senator. Witnesses say ballot boxes were also snatched away by political thugs at polling units of 2 local colleges. Chairman of Election Analysis Center, Adil Janadu, said reports from the observers indicate violence, intimidation of voters, and vote buying. He said the massive rigging will undermine integrity of the governorship election in the state. In Bayelsa, the election was cancelled in some stations following the abduction of an election official and burning of voting materials. Seven members of a family have been killed in a gas pipeline explosion in Bangladesh's southern coastal city of Chittagong. Police say 25 others have been injured in the incident. They said firefighters have joined the rescue operation and the cause of the explosion is being investigated. Witnesses say the explosion blew off the pipeline's boundary wall, crushing many under the debris. The Indian civil society, including historians and academics, have asked for Supreme Court's Ayodhya judgment to be reviewed. In a statement, they said the decision has caused widespread concern among all those who believe in justice.
The joint demand of the review comes from Indian journalists Dhirendra K. Jha and Pamela Philopese. Historian Irfan Habib, academics Jayashti Josham and Badri Raina are also signatories of the request. The statement said top court's judgment is based on criminal destruction of the Babri Mosque, which court itself called unlawful. It says there is not an iota of proof for the top court's assumption that Muslims had stopped praying in the mosque in Mughal and Nawabi times. It also says there is no evidence before very late times Hindus believe Lord Rama was born precisely at Babri Mosque site. In a controversial verdict on November 9th, Indian Supreme Court handed Babri Mosque's land to Hindus.
The Netherlands Queen Maxima will visit Pakistan this month as a special advocate of the UN Secretary-General for Inclusive Financing for Development. State media says the Queen will arrive in Pakistan on November the 25th on a three-day official visit. During her visit, Queen Maxima will discuss possible initiatives to improve Pakistan's economy. Her tour is a follow-up to her visit in February 2016 on the invitation of Pakistani government. The royal dignitary is also expected to call on Pakistan's President Dr. Arif Alvi and Prime Minister Imran Khan. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned within this news. Lows on the highs of the business world now. The ongoing telephonic trade talks between the US and China are progressing constructively. China's state media said the two sides discussed each other's concerns and agreed to maintain communication. Chinese Vice Premier Liu He, US Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, and US Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer had a joint telephonic conversation. They discussed the first phase of an initial trade pact and agreed to hold more discussions in this regard. Earlier, White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow said an agreement was close but did not provide a timeline. Saudi Aramco has set a price range for its listing that values the oil giant between $1.6 to $1.7 trillion. The listing will make it the world's biggest IPO. The IPO offering is key to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's Vision 2030 plan to overhaul and diversify Saudi Arabia's economy. Aramco said it plans to sell 1.5% of its shares at an indicative price range of $8. This will value the IPO to over $25.5 billion at the top end of the range. Aramco could beat the record-breaking $25 billion raised by Alibaba when it made its stock market debut in New York in 2014. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.